We've got the go-ahead. Okay, we are live. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Heather Ashcroft, and I take care of the community here at Digitail. I'm so glad to have everyone here today to discuss this little-known thing called artificial intelligence. Okay, just kidding. Everyone knows the buzz around AI. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've heard about it, you've used it, and you likely have opinions on it. But what do other people think about it? At the beginning of this year, we collaborated with the American Animal Hospital Association to conduct a study on artificial intelligence in veterinary medicine. With input from nearly 4,000 veterinary professionals, we gained some really valuable perspectives on the hopes, dreams, and fears around AI's integration into pet care. Sebastian is going to give us some more insight into the results of our survey in just a minute. But first, we have gathered an amazing group of experts here today, and I'm really looking forward to kicking off this conversation with them. But we must start with some introductions. So we'll have everyone give a short intro to who they are and what they do. And why don't we start with who's next to me on my screen, which is our cybersecurity expert, Clint. And then we'll hear from the Fennies, and we'll have Sebastian go last, who then can take us through some of the survey findings. So Clint, take it away.
Yeah, my name is Clint. I'm the founder of a company called Luca Veterinary Data Security. We oversee the technology for about 226 hospitals across the US and Canada. There's probably isn't much we haven't seen when it comes to technology in vet practice. And yeah, I'm here. As Sebastian will say, I'm a bit of a contrarian when it comes to new technology and always looking at the potential risks and how do we avoid those. So yeah, happy to be here.
And I'm Dr. Cody Creelman. I am a veterinarian and the CEO of FenVet. We are a 3-practice veterinary clinic brand in Alberta, Canada.
I'm Dr. Cheryl Alenko. I'm an associate veterinarian at FenVet, so I'm a Fenny, very proud to be one. I work primarily in small animal medicine and am a very avid AI user.
Stacy, I'll let you go next.
Oh no.
Oh, she's still muted. Oh no, we heard you.
Okay, sorry. I'm Stacy. I'm part of the leadership team at FenVet, also a very proud Fenny. I primarily am stationed out of the Airdrie, Alberta practice, but have been helping out at the Equine Repro facility for the last little bit as well.
Nice. It's your turn, Sebastian.
Oh, thank you. Sebastian, CEO at Digitail, super jealous of the Fenny culture. Still things that we need to learn there from the way you're doing things. But when it comes to Digitail, we're the only one cloud-based practice management system and the first one to have integrated AI vet assistant directly in the workflows of the practice. And our whole goal is to create efficiencies around end-to-end workflows for vet practitioners. Without adding more to that one, who's interested in seeing the results of the study that we've done together with AHA?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay, let's do this. Window, share. There we go. We're on. Okay. So at the beginning of the year, we started hearing more and more conversations around how is AI being used. We started, unfortunately, seeing also a lot of misconceptions about how it should be used. And with that, again, of course, it came the questions of how should we actually use AI today in practice? And with that, we had some amazing people in the team that started the collaboration together with AHA, and we ended up asking close to 4,000 respondents around what's their sentiment around AI utilization, adoption levels, and what is their take around how we should influence this technology to actually have a positive impact in our industry today. And the results were quite impressive because what you wouldn't expect is that close to 84% of the respondents were familiar with AI and its applications. And even more, if you do the calculations around the last two categories, it ends up with more than 30% of the respondents actually use it today on a daily or weekly basis in their practice. And the surprising thing is that if you compare adoption curves of new technologies in certain industries, for the first time, the vet space actually resembles the adoption curve from computer programmers of new technologies, which means that, well, I don't know about you, but if you think of the vet space in general, we don't have such adoption of new tools. But for the first time, it's going to be, it's basically peaking out and being one of the top adopters for new technologies. And this has been super, super exciting to see. Then if you think of positivity, overall, we had general optimism around AI. But the interesting part was the relatively skeptical group was the younger professionals, which this would be surprising because you would expect that, no, they should be probably the most excited ones. But the reason why this is probably happening is that in any new technology, when it comes into a space, you need more skeptical people to actually shape the technology. And this is, at least from our side, one of the another positive news of this survey is that together with them, we have a chance of actually shaping the technology to make it ready for mass market and then get it into the hands of everyone. So we saw general optimism around AI tools, and then probably the simplest one to read, but the most impactful is that the more people use it, the more excited they get about AI tools. And this, again, super simple, but the most powerful, because the alternative to this one would have been to have a technology that's more of a hype, that people talk about it, it's cool for a couple of months and then it fades away. But in this case, actually, the more people use it, the more people see more use cases and they want to try it even more. Then when it comes to what are the main use cases that people apply it to already or see the most benefits, the top 3 ones were voice-to-text transcriptions, record keeping and administrative tasks, and imaging and radiology. And for at least for imaging and radiology, it makes a lot of sense because for already 5 more years, you've had tools in the market that were applying AI to imaging and radiology. But the other 2, voice-to-text transcriptions and record keeping, these were the ones that grew significantly in the past years and ended up being on the top podium. And then all the other ones, to be honest, we've seen similar scoring for them. But it was interesting to see that these are the main categories that people feel excited about when it comes to applications. Then another interesting one is that leaving the other 30% that are already using it, up to 40% are interested in integrating AI into their practice in the future. So you can see it's not just the excitement of the people that are using it, but also the interest to apply this in their day-to-day workflows. Core benefits of AI, again, not a specific category that was a winner, but from time efficiency, client communication, support for veterinary staff, financial, and improved accuracy for decision and support. But I think the main takeaway for this slide is that we're seeing now AI as a productivity tool, and we're also seeing the first early signs that it can be used also for medical support. And again, this is showing how AI is already being shaped to have bigger impact in VetMed. Then out of the business impact, the one that I would highlight the most would be that 52.5% of the respondents believe that AI may give their hospital a competitive advantage. And that's quite significant, as in, again, more, 1 in 2 people would use this as a competitive advantage for their hospital. With drivers of AI adoption, what was interesting is that in the dropdowns for answers, we had hearing about it from another vet or from another veterinary professional in the space. And surprisingly, people haven't picked that one as being one of the top. What people actually cared more about when it comes to AI were personal positive experiences and case studies. So by far, these 2 were the top ones. And then removing friction, of course. So the closer it can be in the tools that we already use, so we don't need to increase the friction, of course, it will increase the adoption. And probably one of my favorite, and it's going to be also one of the final slides for what we've learned out of the study, but the concerns. And starting from the top one with 70% of respondents are concerned about reliability and accuracy of AI systems. And this we'll have a long conversation with Clint today afterwards on this one. But I see it as a positive because it means that people don't use the tool blindly, and they understand that AI can sometimes give the wrong answer. And AI is just a tool, it's not a solution. So you can't just let it run out there in the wild by itself. It still needs you to oversee and to make sure that the decisions you make afterwards, you're just getting help from the AI tool, but not letting, again, do the entire work on its own. And this is also connected to fear of job displacement. We've heard this. I mean, 36% of the respondents pick this as a concern. But honestly, if you look at what's happening, most likely AI won't replace anyone, but someone using AI will. And this is where it's really important to understand is that AI is a tool that can increase productivity significantly and can help you do more. And then other concerns, data security and privacy, which I'm always joking by saying that it would have been so amazing to have similar results also when it comes to PIMS data and people asking the question around what's our data being used for, who's owning the data, so on and so forth. The big questions when it comes to AI is is the data used for training models? How is the data used? Who owns it? And those are really valid questions that it's really important to ask and to understand. And then for cost of implementation, this is another one which, on one side, the cost of AI tools are going down. The more the technology gets developed, the more it goes down. But this is still a perception that's not really rooted in reality, because right now AI tools can start with as little as $100 or even less per month. And this gives you access to tools that you can try out. And minimum, what you can do is you go on ChatGPT and just try it out and see the benefits for yourself, and then you can look into other tools. But with that being said, if anyone is curious, there's this big QR code that will take you directly to the full study and more raw data and more interesting results that came out of it. And with that being said, I'll pass it on to Heather.
Perfect. Thanks, Sebastian. Okay, so down to the reason why we're all here, the nitty gritty, is to discuss the myths, the things that may be true, may be false, about AI. So the first one that I've got here on my list is that AI is only for veterinarians, that it cannot be used for any other role in a practice, which I know is untrue, but I would love to hear our panel, if anyone has opinions on where AI can come into play for other positions in the hospital.
I can start if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I have been a veterinary technician for over 15 years, and now as part of the leadership team as well. I use it every day. I use it to help enhance my client communications. If I'm writing discharge notes or emails to our clients, I'm helping it summarize the medical record so that I don't have to scroll and read through years of history to find the information I'm looking for. I also use it quite a bit to enhance my communications with my team, my staff, just so that I can write an email that's really tailored, and I can alter the tone, and I can make sure that my message is clear. So I find it really, really useful, even from a support staff standpoint.
That's perfect. I think one of the most interesting use cases that I have heard of, and this might actually be really helpful for you, Stacey, is scheduling and trying to make sure that you have coverage when people have, paid time off booked, and basically feeding the AI the information, giving it the parameters, and having it kind of do a lot of the hard work for you that would take a lot of time and energy, juggling different things, like a lot of the managerial aspects. So, you might want to try that out and see how it works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to find an AI tool that can have inputs of all the nuances of all our FENnies, because we all work a compressed work week, and there's a lot of individual preferences. We try and be so flexible with our staff and really cater to their needs, which ends up creating a ton of variation in our schedule. And so we haven't quite found the right AI tool to help us sort out all the nuances that we're hoping to be able to provide to our staff, but we're certainly open to suggestion.
I think some back end work on like what prompt you're using might actually be the key to what you're trying to do rather than the actual tool.
Okay.
So yeah, try that out. Did anyone else want to jump in there? But I feel like Stacey kind of covered it. I mean, I can speak to it as well as a support staff coming from my position in emergency medicine and shelter medicine. Having AI use when I was in practice would have been a complete game changer. It would have saved so much time in basically all of the things that you mentioned with the client communications. And also when I worked in shelter med, doing a lot of the post-adoption, behavioral quirk handouts that we would always call them, right? Like, so resource guarding, how do you manage this? How does an animal decompress after coming home? All of these things that took me tons of time researching and putting together. Basically, if you prompt it correctly, the AI can give you an outline very, very quickly and save you so much time.
I think to layer in just a couple other things as well that we've seen in use. One would be around our virtual client care coordinators. So we have a team of remote receptionists that are utilizing a modern VoIP system in order to field the calls. And I see a really interesting use case in recording those phone calls and creating an auto-generated summary of the client communication that they can then put into the medical record, just improving compliance for record keeping of that client communication, but then also making sure all of that information is in there as well. And then for our practice specifically across every level, whether that's the veterinarians, the leadership team, TAs, technologists, we do have an internal marketing team that works hard every single day. And all of those also are utilizing AI to help generate ideas, to really execute well on different marketing initiatives that we have. So that's also been an interesting one to watch too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really key. I think that's something that isn't discussed a whole lot at the forefront of AI use in vet med is actually the marketing role that it can take as well. And that kind of ties into the client communication aspect. But trying to think outside the box on how you can use AI in your practice is really key. I think we'll move on to the next one. The next one that I've got here on my list is that AI is difficult to implement. So who wants to jump in on that one?
I think I can speak to that. I, as a millennial, I think when I graduated vet school, I kind of graduated a little later. I was in the beginning of my 30s when I started, and I actually found it really hard to use Google Mail. I know it's embarrassing. So I was not a very quick adapter of technology. I'm being completely honest. I knew how to use my Mac, and that was kind of it. And so when I finally moved to Fen, and we primarily use Gmail, I was kind of a little bit like, oh, I don't like this. But when AI came out, because I'm also a very avid TikTok user and I learned about it through TikTok, just learning about like simple things like ChatGPT really opened up this entire giant universe of artificial intelligence and what you can do with it. So I literally just started with the most simplest of prompts to get ChatGPT to do simple things like make a medical record for me. I didn't even know what I was doing. But in doing that, you kind of figure out very quickly that, oh, it's not giving me what I want. And you can then ask it to very quickly change or even ask it, what can I give me a prompt that you will then create this thing I want. So it's really adaptive and really easy to use because it's like using Google search, the search bar, but then it gives you more concise answers. So I think it's a really easy technology to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you there. Anyone else have an opinion?
I would just say what I saw in terms of the implementation is just kind of the virality that happens within a hospital. You see, a power user, an early adopter like Dr. Cheryl, utilizing it. And it doesn't take very long when you put yourself into a clinical situation of people peeking over her shoulder, wondering what's going on and wondering how good, like, how are your medical records so great? How are you making such great client communication? That really drives the other team members to then pique their interest to start using. So there is quite the viral component. Once you get one user within a hospital, it spreads pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that was the sentiment was definitely echoed in the survey results too, right? The proof is in the pudding, as they say. Okay, we'll move on to the next one because I want to cover as many of these as we can. The next one is that AI lacks accuracy. Who wants to jump in there?
I will jump in here because I think actually this one was really unique for me. I said on another AI webinar panel with the executive directors, so like the group that oversees all the different VMAs for all the state, local VMAs here in the States. There was a doctor by the name of Dr. Appleby that actually like opened my eyes to a lot of the current problems with AI tools in vet med and how inaccurate they currently are, and like actually how unreliable they currently are once you peel back behind the marketing layer, like the marketing kind of like onion skin of like, oh, use AI. If you actually look at the results for like images and like cytology and some of these other tests, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to speak to the specifics, but I think if you have a chance, definitely look at Dr. Appleby's work. He's also Canadian, ironically. So I did hold a little bit of a different opinion in him in that, like, okay, sure, it's not good now, but if you look at like the rate of adoption and how quickly things improve, it's going to be 6 months, maybe 12 months before it's absolutely amazing. But I do think that there are a lot of companies in vet med that are claiming the use of AI where really it isn't that accurate, and it's still very new. And I think we do have to be a bit skeptical about the accuracy of certain AI tools, especially when it comes to the diagnostic piece.
I think I can speak to both of those points, actually. The first, maybe I'll just touch on what you were just talking about, specifically diagnostics. So I don't utilize a lot of AI tools for diagnostics specifically, but we do have this program called SignalPet that we use that will look over our radiographs. And I always use it, and it's not because I'm not confident in my ability to interpret radiographs. I use it as like a backup because I'm not perfect, I can miss things. And a lot of the time, if I don't see anything, I will wait for that SignalPet report to come back to just make sure that, yes, it doesn't find anything either. So it's not necessarily like I'm using it because I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm using it as like sort of a fail-safe, if that makes sense. So in other cases, I'm also not using AI to teach me things I don't know. So I'm using it for differential lists, and I'm looking at the differential lists as things that my brain just can't keep all of those things in, but I remember them. So, I mean, if it brings up, for instance, you know, a cat that's sick has very specific symptoms, and I don't think of FIP as a differential. It still is a differential because of very specific things I'm seeing, but I may not have thought of that thing. So it's really useful in that way. It might bring up that, who knows, shoelaces is a diagnosis or a differential. I mean, I know that shoelaces is not a differential. So is it accurate? Maybe not, but I have the wherewithal to understand that that is not a differential. So I'm not using it as a tool to teach my clients. I'm using it as a tool to help my clients, and I'm the fail-safe, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the leaning on AI as, you know, a diagnostic tool, it's a tool to support the vet. It's not a diagnostic tool at this point, right? Like it's you're still using your background in education, all of the information that you know. But like Cheryl said, I think that's probably one of my favorite uses of the AI. The AI that's integrated into Digital is the differential list support, right? Because I've worked in vet med for over 20 years, and I've worked with so many different vets, and you notice that things that you see a few times like in a week, then they tend to be top of mind, right? So we have this in our head. We know that this is an issue that's been having, and then we get in a new patient. The way that it's presenting is similar to this, so we go right to that because that's what we're used to doing. But sometimes we forget about all of the other differentials that maybe could be in there, right? And this is where AI is supportive, right? Because exactly like Cheryl said, it's going to throw things out at you that maybe aren't at top of mind, but that you already know. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this one is probably one that's going to be going to Clint also. AI is a threat to privacy and security.
Absolutely, that's the short answer. I mean, there's nothing else to say. I mean, absolutely. I mean, there are a million different rabbit holes we could go down this one, but the short answer is yes.
Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah. Okay, so we'll start with like the cybersecurity side. So in cybersecurity, you used to have a problem where it took very sophisticated individuals to be able to create programs, find vulnerabilities, deploy them across the World Wide Web to then basically, the most popular tool is what we call ransomware. And it's kind of two stages. They basically like brick all of your computers and they ask you for a certain amount of money in Bitcoin. It's the short of it. Used to be a very complicated process that then moved into what we call RAS, so ransomware as a service, right? So where if I wasn't that skilled at making the program, I could outsource it and hire a company that would give me all the tools and the instruction sets on how to deploy it, and they would just take a cut, or they would take a percentage, or like all the payments would go to them, and then they would just give me some sort of cut from like actually deploying it out and getting it out on the web and finding who to take advantage of. We are now gotten to a point with these models where they've built models that now allow unsophisticated people, especially in South America. It appears we have a lot of, like the U.S. government has a lot of people down in like the CIA for the United States and like the other Five Eyes organizations go to Argentina a lot because there are a lot of these kids that are really good at figuring out how to use these AI models to now build tools and deploy them easier. So it has essentially like opened up the floodgates to make it so that like you don't have to be super technical to be able to get the code set to be able to build these things, because you can find it and it'll give you the instruction sets on how to deploy it. That's the first one. The second one is there's a large coalition of attorneys based out of Silicon Valley that work in data privacy and security and intellectual property that talk a lot about the idea and the fears of companies essentially putting IP out in these LLMs, these language models like ChatGPT or Google Bard, or what's the other one? Sebastian, what's the third one? There's like the other big.
The Jasper?
Claude or?
Oh, Claude.
Not Claude,
yeah.
Anthropic.
Yeah.
And
where basically like they know that information is being stored, and so somebody else could potentially access it. What's the leak? There's the other aspect of like, okay, well, on the backside of this, you could have what we call poisoning the well. So what happens if a bad nation state actor, which is constantly trying to destroy the U.S. and North American economy, gets access to the data pool on the back end for any of these big models that a lot of people are learning in, and essentially poison the well, right? Where they're dropping code sets in that nobody knows is there. It's feeding false information, or it's then deploying tools onto people's machines that are using it. So there are a lot of big risks, and I'll get off my soapbox there.
Okay, so what do you think is like the takeaway? What do we need to know in VetMed to stay safe using AI?
The first one, when it comes to data privacy, I think like the short answer is don't record anything that you wouldn't feel comfortable like having on a billboard. So like don't input anything that you would feel like if I took the information that you pasted and I put it on a billboard on the highway, would you be embarrassed to have that out there? That's the first one. Another angle to that would be, how would you feel if the information you inputted into any one of these models was read in a court? I think an important piece of this is that the under like, I think it's the Patriot Act, there was this FISA court, right? So it's like the FISA court essentially gives the United States government a way to get around the warrant requirements to basically search and find information on you. So the short answer is if you are like 3 degrees of separation from somebody they consider a nation state terrorist, they can basically search your life to death without requesting a warrant from a court first, which means you get notified. This law was supposed to expire this year, and Congress and the DOJ are fighting to actually reenact it. So that just tells you how much they're pushing to have this backdoor law still available. So the short answer is like anything you put on there could potentially be being looked at by the government and then used against you at some point, whether that's good or bad. I think there's definitely a difference in culture from, the Canada and the United States. We very much have like, I'm not doing anything illegal. You have no right to look into my life, and this idea of privacy. And that's slowly being whittled away, and we're seeing a lot of these laws being used. So that's one piece. So with anything that you input, would you feel comfortable with that being posted on a billboard when it comes to like maybe specific things you're doing in your vet hospital that are unique that you've spent a lot of time crafting, I think is one. Do you want everybody knowing how you're doing that, or does it give you a unique marketplace advantage that only you want to know? I wouldn't put that stuff on there. There's also a case in Europe where Italy outlawed ChatGPT for a period of time because it was basically scraping information about the public off the World Wide Web without anybody's consent. There has been some backdoor negotiations to where now it is allowed. So it's like, did ChatGPT and all their money just write the Italian government a big check? No, I haven't really seen why or how that has kind of been cleaned up. But it is, if you are in Italy, you can now still use it. Another short answer would be if you just want to maintain some sense of privacy. We have a free ebook on our website you can download for free. If you go to luca.vet and you go to our ebook section, there's an ebook that'll give you like 5 or 6 things you can do to help maintain some sort of digital privacy in an era of a permanent record. Yeah, that's it, I think.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that, AI is basically equivalent to like posting on social media, searching Google, like that kind of thing? Like it's all trackable.
I think it's worse because you can analyze billions of data sets in an instant, right? I think one of the bigger examples, and again, this doesn't apply to Canadians because we have a different healthcare system here, but or really anywhere else in the world. But one thing that people talk a lot about is, all right, so you have an independent company that we don't really have any insights into, right? And I think if you look at Elon Musk's legal suit against OpenAI, there's a legal suit in that the initial founding, it should have been an open source kind of program, for lack of a better term. There are so many different company organizations and restructurings of OpenAI that allowed them to kind of negotiate that initial founding. And now they can kind of keep everything under lock and key, especially with the power and the money of Microsoft in these companies. So where I think so now we have no idea how these models are really, there's no transparency. There's no democratization of how these tools are actually working. So we don't know who's paying big money to gather large amounts of data or have them scrape large amounts of data in the market. So the example we like to use is like, say I go on to ChatGPT and I'm like, I've got this like lump in my side. Like, here are my symptoms, and I'm just asking questions to maybe help me figure out what's going on. My insurance company, United Healthcare, could then be like, wait a minute, we have a tool that's now scanning all of these AI models for every one of our patients, or every one of our customers, I should say. Clint has a lump that he's like searching, so maybe we should raise his rates because maybe he has cancer, maybe he has something else. And so now we're going to preemptively raise his rates before something else happens. I think the other piece goes to I think if we look at VetMed specifically, we have the titans in the industry that have all the money and the power, right? So if we're using like Microsoft Copilot and we're uploading our entire business set to Microsoft in OpenAI, and then you have companies like IDEX or Covetrus or Zoetis or BI or whoever paying big money to say like, hey, can give me access to that data, right? Like I know you're storing it, so now I want controls. And because we don't have like GDPR in the United States, we have CCPA, which is pretty weak, and it's been adopted in like 16 other states. There's a potential now that these big companies are basically reviewing every aspect of your business, like we've seen with the pharmaceutical companies, like squeezing out the local veterinarian to get you to buy, to do like online drug purchases. Like look at the 2019 Covetrus data breach where they were like sending out notifications like, hey, you no longer have to go to the hospital to buy your drugs. you can buy those drugs directly from us without the approval of the hospital. And some of the emails were like even branded from the hospital. I had some hospitals showing me like copies of the emails that went out. There was like their branding, their name, and they had given no approval and no consent for that to happen. There was a big shakeup at Covetrus. A lot of people left. But I think if you look at the power of those things, and that was before AI. So now it's like, what information are we giving to it? Because we're not protecting ourselves. That gives access to these other companies to find ways to side skirt us or potentially take advantage of us, just like with social media or any of these other tools, right? Like I think Facebook could tell if a woman was pregnant before she really knew because of the things that she would be looking for. So I think now that only pounds it with the power of these tools. So I think these are just some of the general safety and privacy concerns we got.
Yeah, these are things that are interesting and like definitely important to keep it at top of mind. Sorry, Sebastian, you had your hand up for a second.
Yes. So yeah, indeed, like Clint's spot on with GDPR. I think GDPR is probably one of the first regulations that do put the power back to the owner of the data and stops all companies like doing other things with the data. So again, GDPR is definitely a big point. However, it's my chance to probably be the devil advocate to you in this one, because you did mention that whatever you put into any of the LLMs gets out there in the open. But I think one of the most important parts is to understand using a free LLM versus a paid LLM. So if you go in the free version of the ChatGPT, then of course all that data will be used for training the model because that's why it's free. But if you end up using the paid version where the licensing basically doesn't allow the companies to use that data for training, or again, you need to read their terms and agreements, but most of the companies, the ones that will charge a premium subscription, will guarantee that they're not using the data and they remove it from the servers in 24 hours.
But like I have a paid version of ChatGPT, and in order for it to not participate, you have to go in and remove. You have to go into the settings and you have to change it to basically not do the telemetry and all the other stuff. So you still have to change it. And I think the other problem is that like with most tools, like in vet med, it's like how many tools can we use for free without actually paying for everything? And like we have a rule where it's like if it's free, you're the product, right? So if like your entire business Gmail account is free, if you're using the free at Gmail one, you're Gmail's product. They're reading every email that goes through there. Are you comfortable with that or not? If you are, like, then to each his own. Like if you're
okay, their LLMs are already trained on your emails. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. So I think, yes, you're right. But I think in vet med, there's this problem where it's like, oh, it's free, we're going to use it. Now we're fine. Who cares about Fluffy's medical records until it gets stolen? And then you actually care, you know?
Okay, we have a question, but I do want to be mindful that we've got a couple more points that I want to cover, and we're kind of getting close to time. But the question is, how can we ensure that the use of AI complies with the laws in Europe regarding data protection? I think this is pretty niche, especially concerning the transcription of conversations into text or creation of summaries.
I don't know if that's for me, but I'm not European, so like I
Yeah,
know,
this
like,
is
I know
pretty
GDPR.
niche, so maybe we'll leave that and we'll revisit that and we'll try to answer that one after.
Just on the last part, though, not Europe related, and I certainly agree with Clint on the high level of this, but to get into the granular clinical level, I think the first thing that I'm hearing across different practice managers and veterinarians is around the recording aspect of the conversation that happens within the exam room. So it is technically a recording, and depending on which state or province you're in, there's debate on whether or not that needs to be disclosed to the client. You have some jurisdictions where as long as one party is knowledgeable that a conversation is being recorded, then that's perfectly allowable. And there's some jurisdictions where both parties need to understand that. And then because this is so new, and the conversation itself isn't necessarily being recorded, but then transcripted and modified. What do we have to do as an industry in order for us to be able to make sure that we're acting responsibly and ethically? And that's a conversation we'll be continuing to have in the future. I don't think there's a clear answer on that yet across the board.
But I think there's an interesting point on this idea of like acting ethically, right? And I think Sebastian can speak to this because we have had a number of conversations about companies using data in vet med that are just like, well, everybody else is doing it. Why shouldn't we? Right. And like, there are only, I think, a couple of companies when it comes to vet med where it's like, no, there should, and I think Digitail is one of them. I think Vet Verify is another one where they're actually like, look, even though potentially, yes, like every other company is just gathering your entire practice management system, the heartbeat of your hospital, we're actually going to be good shepherds of your data and say, no, we only want verification records, right? And I think Digitail is also going this, taking a step in this, like, no, we're actually going to act ethically, and partners that come with us, we're only giving them access to data that they need to function for the service that they're providing. And I think there is this ill or this like sickness in vet med where it's just like, well, everybody else is doing it, why can't I? And I've talked with like a number of CEOs of like big data companies in vet med, and they just have this idea. It's like, well, yeah, but without me investing all the money to do all this work, like this tool wouldn't be available. You wouldn't have all this insight. And it's like, yeah, but without you taking the data from the hospital, you can't build that, right? Like it's an equal partnership. You have the skill set, you have one unique skill set. The hospital has another one of actually doing the medical work and providing you the valuable medical data and customers that you need to analyze. And yes, we need your skill set to make that better, but there should be an open and equal and transparent conversation about how that data is being handled. And it's not really in vet med right now. And that's, I think, why I'm a bit of a contrarian when it comes to a lot of these things, because the number of businesses that are actually doing things, I think, the ethical way, because they know that it's the right thing to do, not because necessarily a law is forcing them to.
I agree. That's one of, I remember, I bet Sebastian remembers one of our first phone calls where I gave him the gears on this exact conversation. Also feeling frustrated for the industry that nobody is putting the pieces together and connecting the dots in terms of what does this all mean when you have diagnostics companies owning PIMS, owning clinics, owning pharmaceutical companies, and it all just tying together. I definitely roasted Sebastian over the coals trying to figure out, what about my data? Where is that going? What is the long tail of Digitail? Where are you going? Who are you partnering with? Who are your investors? I asked all those questions, but you're 100% right, Clint. Most of us don't, and that's a big problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important. That's a really important piece. Okay. All right. One, I think that I want to get to for sure is that AI is cheating and that it's going to diminish client trust. The ethical considerations, opportunities for personalized and increased practice thoughtfulness. So how do you think that AI is going to affect client trust and the human-animal bond? Do you think it's cheating?
I don't think it's cheating. I think if you are not using... I mean, we have a moral obligation, right, to make sure we're doing the best for our patient and client. And I think when you're using this, or at least when I'm using this tool, I'm using it again to help the client. I'm not using it like, I don't know, is cheating figuring out something I would never have thought of that I should have known and prevented an animal from dying or made an animal feel better? Is cheating, changing the tone of my email so that I'm very considerate after a really long day of multiple one after another euthanasias, and I want to make sure that that one client whose puppy was sick but is doing okay is feeling better. I don't really think it's cheating. I really believe that if you're not using it, you are behind the curve. And while I know that, AI and data science are moving forward really rapidly, and the security issue is something that is scary. I do understand that. But I think for the purposes that I'm using it for right now, and not entering, the client's entire information and only very specific things like the dog is Fluffy and her name is Susan, and something that happened with the animal, changing the tone of my email, getting differentials, looking at some x-rays, I don't believe it's cheating, in my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Stacy is probably one of the most ethical and non-morally corrupt person that I have ever met in my life. So I would love to hear, based off of her experience, what she's seen pre-practice using AI and post-practice using AI on that client trust and human-animal bond.
I don't think it's cheating at all. I mean, before AI was out there, we were using chat forums, right? We were using Vin. We were getting information from our peers, and like we said previously, we're not using it to find the answer. We're using it to confirm suspicions and support opinions. I only think it's helping us. It's not an ethical downgrade at all.
Mm-hmm. I think that's important. I think that one thing, this thought of if it's cheating, I feel like in the veterinary profession, it is very, very difficult. It's no secret we have a high suicide rate. We have people leaving the profession left and right. I think anything that we can do to support the people who are doing this difficult job it shouldn't be considered cheating. I mean, the fact that people who are using the quick soap, the dictation that's in Digitail to have their records written in half the time and are able to actually get home on time and see their families and be able to, not have this looming dread over their head of like, oh, I've had 5 appointments so far. Now I need to catch up on 5 records. I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle that we're not really hitting on right now. But I think that's, for me, it would have been life-changing. And I know a lot of the vets that, they stay after hours finishing their soaps, that now they're actually able to have hobbies and do things that they enjoy. Right. Okay, I think so. We are technically, over time, but so anyone who needs to drop off is welcome to do that. I do have a couple more points if you guys are up for it. What do you think? Yeah, okay. Okay, so the next one is that AI is too expensive, that AI tools are too costly.
Well, as an independent user, so I pay for ChatGPT. I don't think it's expensive. I use it in multiple other areas of my life. My sister's a realtor. She uses it every day. So she pays for it too. And it's $20. I pay, I think, $23 a month for ChatGPT. And I literally use it every single day, 2 to 3 times a day for numerous other things. So I really don't think that it's expensive at all.
I think if you just quantified time, we have approximately 45 FENnies across the practices. So even if you just took a base pay of, say, $30 an hour, you only have to save a few hours a month to be able to pay for this. And when you compound that over 45 people, it seems like it could be much more expensive in terms of the time savings. Mm-hmm. It truly saves us dozens and dozens of hours collectively per week.
Mm-hmm. I think it's perception of value.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that our team just has done a case study now with a 5 DVM practice that is using the AI dictation, and it ended up saving them on a weekly basis 50 hours. So if you run the math then with what you just said, Dr. Cody, then we can reach out to
well, and that's just DVM time. I think of Stacy's time as a practice leader, just utilizing it for client and team member communication. It would, once you layer down the multiple levels of the practice, not just the DVMs, it becomes orders of magnitude more efficient.
And then if you extrapolate from that too, when you're giving people time back, you're saving them time. They're not spending so much time with their medical records, etc. That's a main part of our mission, is taking care of our people. So if we, yes, it costs us money to implement these AI tools, but the return on investment we're getting for less staff burnout and more staff satisfaction is worth it tenfold. When you do that math, that's not expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really important to quantify it in that way, right? Like, what is your people's time worth? What is, the culture and staff morale worth, right? What's your peace of mind worth? Okay, so the next one that we have is that AI will put people out of jobs. What do we think about that? I know Sebastian loves to say,
in some regards, I would say yes, right? Like Sebastian's point, because it's going to be somebody who knows how to use it and is like far more productive and better at their job and can do a bunch of things that makes them better. Like for instance, I'm a part of a local nonprofit, and they do this like toy run every year, and it's a mostly like older individuals that are part of this group, and they don't use a lot of technology, and like I use ChatGPT to like create images like for the t-shirt for the toy run. It gave me some samples, and they're like blown away by this stuff, right? So it's like, but I can do this in a matter of instance, and I'm like, here's some bunch of examples. And like, how did you do this so fast? And it's like the most amazing thing, right? So if you have somebody that owns a business that's maybe older, that has been in business forever, and they're hiring somebody, and they're like, show me how you would create graphic design images for this project we're working on. Well, I would start by doing this. This gives me the base template. Then I would edit it, and I'd be done in like 15 minutes. As opposed to somebody's like, well, I would sketch it out, and it's going to take me 3 or 4 hours. That they're obviously going to get the job, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think even like prompt engineering is a great example. It's a new skill set that people are going to have to adapt to in order to be competitive in the job market. And I think of an example in VetMed, right? You have a staff member who does things workflows the old ways without being able to utilize technology to cut down on the times that it takes to write client emails or to write up the SOAP notes, any of that. You're going to be obviously hiring the person that is able to do the same job more efficiently and faster. So it's definitely a skill that needs to be taken into consideration for sure.
I think in the short scale of time, yes, you could make an argument that potentially a practice that is utilizing modern tools, being more efficient, maybe doesn't need to hire that next veterinarian. Let's say you're a 3-doctor practice and you're really optimized and efficient. Maybe you can get through one full-time equivalent more cases as a group of 3, and therefore you're not hiring that next new grad or associate veterinarian because you can handle that higher level of caseload. So in a short time scale, maybe you could make that argument. But I think history has proven itself with basically any innovation that's happened, that there just becomes even more opportunity for future employment, new job creation, on and on. So I don't think there's ever been a massive spike. Like when the tractor was invented and 80% of the population was out on the land hoeing the carrots, the tractor didn't cause 80% unemployment for infinity. Those people got different jobs in different industries, and that's kind of how history has worked so far.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Just really quickly to touch on scribes, because I know initially I thought like, oh, it's gonna no more scribes. But if you think about it, really, imagine a world where you do have a scribe, and the scribe is the one who records the conversation, reviews the SOAP, edits and changes anything that needs to be changed, makes AI create the discharge note, schedules a follow-up for the client, books the appointment that you guys already talked about, does your invoice, like all of these things. Like scribes can be using AI in a way that works along with veterinarians, just like, how amazing would that be if you could have, 2 techs and the tech doesn't have to be doing your bills because your scribe is listening in on the conversation using AI and has the time, doesn't have to type everything, but then can be doing your invoice. So I think there's room for a lot of the industry to expand with AI, not necessarily get smaller.
Mm-hmm.
No one's getting replaced. They're just getting upskilled or reskilled, right? You're learning something new, and it's going to change the way that your workflow goes day to day, but it doesn't, you still need the person there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you need a person.
Definitely. Okay. The next one's kind of a tie into that. AI will lead to a loss of manual skills and professional judgment.
I think it's the opposite. I think you're going to see a rise in demand of like people with like unique artistic skill sets, right? Like people where it's like, especially people that like things that require hands, like it's going to be very much in need. Like, this unique. Where am I going with this? I know what I mean by this, but it's hard to elaborate. I don't necessarily think so. I think it's going to create a demand for people with unique creative skill sets in some regards.
Mm-hmm. I think the time that it saves is kind of the important thing. Actually, Cody, I was listening to a podcast you did earlier on AI, and you actually touched on something that I was like, yes, which was the time saved for vets using AI, using this tool can maybe allow them to focus on other skills that they maybe need to brush up on. And you actually brought up on emotional intelligence and being able to relate to people, because in my experience, a lot of veterinarians go to vet school because they have a passion for animals and science and maybe not necessarily interpersonal skills. And there's a really big kind of gap between the skills that you need to be a successful veterinarian in practice and the skills that you need to be able to communicate, patient needs and treatment plans and really difficult choices and financial constraints when you're actually working, when you're in that exam room with the client.
Yeah, I think there will be a shifting of the professional judgment and manual skills that are necessary in the future. I don't think everything's going to stay exactly the same forever. I have this picture in my mind of a couple of Boston Dynamic robots wrestling a German Shepherd in a treatment room, and to see how effective they may be in that. But on the flip side, I've also recently watched a video of an AI controlled Da Vinci surgical robot removing the eggshell off of a raw egg and keeping the membrane intact, and then using a scalpel to incise into that membrane and then suture it closed without any human intervention. Do you know how much harder that is to do than neutering a dog? So that maybe, right? If we scale that out into the future, maybe there is some manual veterinary skills that are going to be taken over, and because they do a better job, and it's safer and it provides a better customer experience. Maybe it's even bringing costs down. I think we are going to see crazy things like this in the next 10, 20, 30 years. Imagine veterinary medicine in 200 years. I couldn't even put together, but I don't think that will replace veterinarians and support staff and other veterinary professionals from making sure they have the appropriate manual skill sets and professional judgment for the year that they're actually living in.
I'll try to be quick on this one, but I think in general, as human beings, we want to do more with less time, or at least with the same amount of time that we're already investing in things. I think that's generally available. We always want to be able to do more. And currently, we're already using technology to do that. Either if it's like simple computers or Google search or just apps in general, we already use that. And now AI takes everything to the next level. And if you think about it as a problem of input and output, so how fast do we get information from our brains to computers, and how fast do we get the information from computers to our brains? So this is basically the big bandwidth problem that we're solving, and we're improving now with AI tenfold. Because currently, if you just look at, let's say a patient comes in and you need to go through 20 soaps of patient history to understand what's happening, it would take you quite some time to scroll through them and see all the information. While with AI embedded tools now, you can just get the history in a prompt like super quick. And that now saves a lot of time that you wouldn't need to go through that entire scroll of getting the information from the computer. And then when it comes to AI dictation, instead of staying after the visit, typing everything, or just dictating afterwards, you just let it run in the background. It captures the entire discussion. And then it's no longer an input problem where I need to spend 5 minutes. It just like captures the entire conversation and puts it in the system. So I'm saying all of these because we talked about like manual skills, and it's going to be a loss. Like, will it be a loss because now I don't need to read 20 pages and I can get a summary? Or will it be a loss because I don't need to type and it will take this summary out of the context? I would say no, but that's my vote.
When you're ready to launch the first version of Neuralink digital beta test, I'm sure Dr. Cheryl will be the first in line for her cortical implant.
Maybe. I would love to be able to do more like hands-on things that computers couldn't. I think that's great. Give me more time to do better things.
Okay, I think we'll end on this question, or this myth, I guess. Maybe it's myth, maybe it's true. Do you think that AI adoption is inevitable? And what do you think people need to know to stay ahead of the curve, or at least to prepare?
Okay, I'll take the first part. I do think it's inevitable because just of the sheer gains that you get out of it. But I do think one area that's extremely important for everyone to understand is that this prompt engineering that we're talking about is crucial, because if you go back to the time when we started having Google search, people were searching for things wrongly. As in, you put the wrong input, you get a wrong result, of course. It's the same thing here. If you understand how prompting works and you put the right prompt, you're going to get amazing answers that you can use straight from the get-go. But if you're at the beginning, you're probably not going to get it right. So what I would encourage people is just like try different prompts, and it's all about getting the prompt right to get the right answer. So I do think it's inevitable, but it's just a matter of learning how to use the technology.
So my thoughts on this are, and to try to be as brief as I can, our mission at FenVet is to completely reimagine the veterinary care experience. And that's on the backbone of three specific things. That's exceptional customer experience, amazing practice culture, and innovation of thought. And I had put these three core things in place because I thought that they were necessary in order for us to see this reimagining. And the reason that reimagining was so important to our founding structure was I knew that a paradigm shift was going to be inevitable within veterinary medicine because it's happened in every single industry that's ever existed. There's always a point in time in any industry where there's some sort of innovation or technological advancement, whether or not that's true technology or even just innovation of thought, that then propels a segment of that industry into a completely different category and realm. And I think that's going to happen within veterinary medicine. And what I wanted to do with Fen was to best position ourselves to be able to be on the right side of the curve of that paradigm shift, because I truly believe at some point in the future, whether that's 50 years or 100 years, veterinary medicine is going to look very different than it did in the James Herriot era. And it hasn't really shifted that much to date. So we're always looking for these innovations, these new ideas. This is a core principle that we instill into the rest of the Fennies. And all I can say about AI is this looks like one of the things that could potentially cause a true paradigm shift within the veterinary industry, where we may very well see in the not so distant future a segmentation between practices that are fully integrated and utilizing technologies like this and practices that are not. And if I had to put my bet on which set of practices is going to be the future of veterinary medicine, it would be the ones on the other side of this paradigm shift. So I do think it's inevitable. I think that it is necessary for practices to strongly consider this adoption, because I wouldn't want to be left in the dust, because I see this at scale. I can see the future so clearly as to what this potentially looks like in order for us to be so much more efficient and effective. It's going to be a remarkable difference because we're really only 8 months into this whole conversation. Imagine what it's going to look like 8 years in, and you still have practices that aren't, adopting some of these technologies. You're going to have two separate industries.
I think one important point on this, I think where the industry really needs to adopt, is there's this like hatred of Dr. Googling. This is going to be compounded. Like, we need to adopt to this idea of like the client-facing tools that are going to become available before they get in the exam room. One thing that I've always found ironic about this problem is that there was a Merck animal health study, was it in like 2017 or 2018? So it was like quite a while ago. And they found that majority of pet owners in the US were now like millennial generation. They had crossed the 50% mark. They were like 51 or 52% pet owners. They were actually more likely to Dr. Google before they came in the exam room. But even though they did so, they were more likely to trust the advice of the DVM over the previous generation. So it's like the older generation wasn't Dr. Googling, but they didn't trust the vet as much. Where it's like the younger generation was coming in, they were doing the research beforehand and then more likely to trust the opinion of the vet. So I think we need, as an industry as a whole, to also shift away from this idea of like, you can't try to do any research on your own. You've got to just come and trust me wholeheartedly, before you come in. Like, I think we need a big shift in adoption in like this client relationship.
Just really quickly, I want to touch on what you just said, Clint. I'm a giant proponent of empowering clients to do their own research, especially in cases where I have no idea what is going on. I'll reach out to colleagues and that sort of thing. But if clients come into me and they shamefully say, oh, I've Googled, I tell them I love that. Come informed, know what you're looking for. That, if you tell me something I don't know, I don't care if I'm wrong, I learned something. And having an attitude where you're consistently learning not only makes you a better person, in this case, it makes me a better doctor. So I will do it every single time.
And that's a sentiment that all of our doctors would share, because we have that mindset, that mindset of exceptional customer experience. And client shaming for doctor Googling is not part of a 7-star customer experience.
Yeah, I think you guys have had a lot of really good insight on AI in general. I do think that it is inevitable. I think that it is a benefit. I think it's a wonderful tool that can be helpful to free up time for whatever is the direction of your focus. It can free up time for, your frontline staff to have a deeper connection with the clients, be able to get that rapport. It can free up, your DVMs to get home on time, to be able to, use their brain power for more cases as opposed to getting burnt out faster. Let's see. Sorry, just a question popped up. I think we're going to end it because I think we're running out of time. We're well over time, actually. So I'm going to call it. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to give your opinions. I know all of you guys are really well versed in all of your subjects, and thank you so much. If anyone is interested in using AI in their practice, again, Digitail is the first PIMS to have an AI completely integrated, and all of the Fennies have enjoyed using it. We've got a case study up with another vet clinic. Again, like Sebastian said, their vets are saving 50 hours a week. So it is making a really huge difference. And I think eventually it'll be pretty commonplace. So thanks for taking the time to listen to us.